A helpless young mother fights to protect her baby from people who secretly plan to destroy her life, only for them to discover, too late, that the woman they tried to break holds a powerful secret that could ruin them all. The night had already grown quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over a city when most lights begin to fade and people disappear into their homes. A soft wind moved through the empty street, rustling the leaves along the sidewalk. Under the pale glow of a streetlight, a young woman walked slowly down the road, holding a small baby close to her chest. Her steps were careful but tired. It had been a long day. The kind of day that drains every bit of strength from a mother who has no one else to depend on. Yet despite the exhaustion in her eyes, her arms held the baby gently, protectively, as if nothing in the world mattered more. The little child slept peacefully, wrapped in a soft blanket, unaware of the cold night or the long walk home. The woman adjusted the blanket slightly, making sure the baby stayed warm. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Her footsteps echoed softly against the pavement as she turned onto a narrower street that led toward her apartment building. Only a few dim lights shone from distant windows. Most of the neighborhood was asleep. But then, she heard something. Another sound. Footsteps. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Perhaps just someone else walking home late. Still, the sound continued. Slow. Heavy. Following the same rhythm as her own steps. She stopped walking. The footsteps behind her stopped too. A small chill ran through her body. She slowly turned her head, glancing over her shoulder into the darkness behind her. At first, she saw nothing. Then shapes began to form. 3, maybe 4 men standing under the shadow of a broken streetlight. They weren't talking loudly, but their quiet whispers carried just enough through the night air to send a strange feeling into her chest. A feeling she could not explain. Her grip around the baby tightened slightly. Something isn't right. The men began walking again. This time, faster. Her heart started beating. Harder. Was it just her imagination? Or were they following her? She quickly turned forward again and continued walking, now a little faster than before. Her mind raced with questions she could not answer. Why were they behind her? What did they want? The street ahead suddenly felt longer than it had just moments ago. She pulled the baby closer to her chest. The child stirred slightly but did not wake. Behind her, the footsteps were getting closer. Closer. And then she heard one of the men whisper something to the others. She couldn't make out the full sentence. But she clearly heard one word. The baby. Her entire body froze for half a second. Fear rushed through her veins like ice. Why would they mention her baby? Without turning around again, she quickened her pace, her breathing growing heavier with every step. The quiet street that once felt peaceful now felt like a trap closing in around her. And in that moment, one terrifying thought crossed her mind. What if these men weren't following her by accident? What if they were following her, on purpose? Behind her, the footsteps suddenly sped up. And just like that, the quiet night began turning into something far more dangerous. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself loudly. It simply follows you in the dark. The narrow alley ahead was darker than the rest of the street. Only a weak yellow light flickered from an old lamp hanging above the entrance. The young mother hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Her apartment building was just beyond this shortcut. Normally she would never choose such a lonely path at night. But tonight she was tired, and she wanted to reach home as quickly as possible. She tightened the blanket around her baby and walked faster. Behind her, the footsteps echoed again. Louder now. Closer. Her heartbeat began to pound in her ears. No, please let this just be my imagination. But deep inside, she already knew the truth. The alley stretched ahead like a tunnel of shadows. The air felt colder, heavier. And suddenly, the footsteps behind her stopped pretending to be distant. They were running. Before she could react, a hand grabbed her shoulder violently. She gasped and stumbled forward, nearly losing her balance. Another man rushed in front of her, blocking the narrow path. 3 men now surrounded her in the dim light. Her eyes widened with fear. "Please, stay back," she said, her voice shaking as she pulled the baby closer to her chest. One of the men stepped forward slowly, his face half hidden in darkness. His eyes were fixed on the small bundle in her arms. "The baby," he muttered quietly. A wave of cold panic rushed through her body. Why did they want her child? What could a helpless baby possibly mean to them? "Give it to me," the man said suddenly, reaching toward the child. "No." Her scream cut through the silent alley as she turned her body away, protecting the baby with everything she had. But the men moved quickly. One of them grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away from the child. Another reached for the blanket wrapped around the baby. The mother fought back with desperate strength. She twisted, pushed, and struggled wildly. "Help! Someone help us!" she cried into the empty night. But the alley was silent. Doors were closed. Windows were dark. No one came. One of the men managed to grab the corner of the baby's blanket and pulled hard. The child suddenly woke, crying loudly in fear. The sound shattered the mother's heart. "No! Don't touch my baby!" she screamed again, clutching the child tighter against her chest. For a moment, the struggle became chaotic. Hands pulling, feet stumbling, voices shouting. And then, suddenly, a bright light flooded the alley. Headlights. A car turned sharply onto the road beside the alley, its powerful beams cutting through the darkness. The men froze. Someone inside the car shouted loudly, "Hey! What's going on there?" The unexpected interruption broke the tension instantly. The men exchanged quick, nervous glances. Without another word, they released the woman and ran into the deeper shadows of the alley, disappearing into the night. The mother collapsed against the cold brick wall, breathing heavily, her entire body trembling. Her baby cried softly in her arms. She held the child close, rocking gently, whispering through tears, it's okay, Mommy's here." But inside her heart, fear had already planted its seed. Those men hadn't come by accident. They had come for her baby. And that terrifying truth left only one question echoing in her mind. Why? A mother may be afraid, but nothing in this world is stronger than her instinct to protect her child. The moment she pressed herself against the cold brick wall, clutching her crying baby, the night around her seemed to fade. Her mind drifted back to a time when her life had been completely different. A life filled with laughter, love, and trust, before it all shattered. She had once lived in a bright apartment, surrounded by people she thought were family. Friends who promised to stand by her side. Lovers who swore loyalty with words and smiles. She had believed in them all. But one by one, the walls crumbled. Secrets she had never imagined were whispered behind her back. Promises were broken. Treacheries were committed in silence. The people she trusted most had conspired against her, leaving her vulnerable, alone, and with a choice she never wanted to make. How could those I loved the most turn against me? She wondered, her heart aching with the memory. Her pregnancy had been a blessing and a curse. She had carried her child with hope, yet every heartbeat of that unborn life reminded her of the danger surrounding her. Those who betrayed her had not only wanted to destroy her, they wanted to erase the child she carried, to erase the proof that she existed at all. One night, under the cloak of darkness, she had vanished. Every trace of her old life erased, every connection cut. She became a shadow among strangers, blending into the crowded streets, learning to move quietly, to speak softly, to hide the most precious secret she had ever carried. Even in a new city, new life, and a new identity, she felt the pull of the past. She could never escape completely. Someone from that past had never let her go. A relentless presence, a shadow in every corner, reminding her that the danger had not ended, it had only paused. She remembered the nights she had spent awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence, imagining what might happen if they ever found her again. The fear had been constant, gnawing at her soul, shaping her into someone who knew that survival meant strength, cunning, and unwavering love for her child. Yet even with all her precautions, with all her careful planning, she had never expected to be confronted like this. Not on a quiet street, not with her baby in her arms, and not so soon after finally believing she was safe. I cannot let them touch my child. Not ever, she told herself, her resolve hardening even in the memory. Her past was a story of betrayal and loss, but it was also a story of courage. Each scar she carried was a lesson, each heartbreak a reminder of her resilience. And now, in the dark alley, she realized that the strength born from her suffering was exactly what she needed to protect the life she cherished most. Sometimes the hardest trials give birth to the strongest hearts. Far away from the dimly lit streets and dark alleys, in a towering office filled with polished wood and gleaming glass, powerful figures gathered around a long table. Their faces were calm, their voices measured, but the tension in the room was thick, like the calm before a storm. They spoke of the baby, their words careful yet chilling. To them, it wasn't a child. It wasn't innocence or life. It was a threat, a secret they feared could unravel everything they had built. Everything they had worked for could be destroyed by someone so small? Yes, one of them said, his tone low, almost clinical. That child holds information we cannot allow to surface. It jeopardizes our reputation, our wealth, everything. Another nodded, sipping from a crystal glass, the amber liquid catching the light. Then we remove the problem. Simple as that. It was almost too casual. A life reduced to a calculation, a bundle of vulnerability weighed against power and greed. They discussed the plan as though it were a business deal. Names were whispered. Paths were mapped. The men in the streets, the shadows moving behind her, were all pieces on a board that could be shifted at their command. One woman leaned back in her chair, folding her hands over her chest. "Do they even know who she is?" she asked, a trace of curiosity mixed with disdain in her voice. "They think they can control everything. Even fate," she thought silently, her mind already considering contingencies. Another man chuckled lightly. "It doesn't matter. Whoever she is, whoever she thinks she is, the child is vulnerable. That's all that matters. We eliminate the risk, and our lives remain intact." They spoke without empathy, without hesitation, without imagining the tiny heartbeat wrapped in a blanket somewhere miles away. They saw only consequences to themselves, possibilities of scandal, loss, and embarrassment. For them, the act was necessary, a solution to a problem they refused to see as human. And yet, as they finalized their plan, each confident that their reach was unlimited, none of them realized the one thing that would undo them, the mother they underestimated. The woman they thought was helpless had a past, a resilience, and a heart that refused to bend. They will regret underestimating her. Their absence of awareness seemed almost poetic in its inevitability. From the top floors, looking down on the city below, they plotted in shadows, convinced that fear could control the night. But power, they would soon learn, does not always belong to those who believe themselves untouchable. Those who value power over humanity often forget that courage can come from the most unexpected places. The city streets stretched before her like a maze of shadows and light. Every turn seemed unfamiliar, every alley threatening. Her heart raced, hammering in her chest as adrenaline coursed through her veins. In her arms, the baby whimpered softly, but she refused to stop. Not now. Not ever. She ran faster, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply against the pavement, echoing in the emptiness around her. Behind her, the footsteps returned, closer, faster, relentless. The men were not giving up. How can anyone be so cruel, chasing an innocent child? She thought, her breath catching in her throat. The night air stung her lungs, but she didn't slow. Every streetlight seemed to flicker with suspicion, every shadow a potential danger. She darted through narrow passages, leaping over trash bins, slipping briefly on damp concrete, but never letting go of the baby. Her mind raced with plans and possibilities. She could run to the main road, where cars passed by, where someone might notice her. Or she could hide in the abandoned building at the corner, a place she remembered from years ago. "I won't let them take my baby," she repeated in her mind, clenching her jaw. Her attackers' voices were behind her now, harsh and commanding. "Stop. Give her to us," they shouted, but she didn't dare look back. Fear was heavy, but fear could not overpower the fierce love in her heart. Every instinct screamed at her to survive, to protect the child at all costs. She took a sharp turn into an alley she hoped would lead her to safety. The walls were close, the air thick with the smell of rain and grime, but she pressed on. The baby's soft cries fueled her determination, each sob a reminder of why she could not fail. Her mind flashed briefly to what life had been before, life stolen by betrayal, life she had rebuilt in silence. She had survived before, and she would survive again. Suddenly, the footsteps behind her slowed, then quickened, growing louder. She realized they were gaining on her. Her pace increased. "I can't let them touch her. I can't," she thought desperately. She spotted a faint light up ahead, a small convenience store still open. Without hesitation, she darted inside, sliding the door closed just as the men reached the alley. They cursed and shouted outside, banging on the walls, but she was inside now, breathing heavily, shielding the baby with her arms. Her chest heaved, sweat and tears mingling on her face. The small store felt like a fortress, even if only for a few moments. The baby had stopped crying, sensing the shift in her mother's energy, and nestled closer. She leaned against the cool wall, closing her eyes briefly, knowing that the danger was not gone, but that she had survived another moment, another escape. She had fought with every ounce of herself and had not let fear break her. A mother's courage can light even the darkest path. The night air was heavy with tension, every shadow now seeming alive, every distant sound amplified in her ears. The young mother pressed herself against a brick wall, the baby clutched tightly in her arms, as if the mere act of holding him could shield them from the world's cruelty. Behind her, the men who had pursued her with merciless intent paused, their breaths ragged, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of weakness. They thought they were close to victory. They thought they had the upper hand. But they didn't know the truth. What if everything I thought I needed to hide could actually save us? She wondered silently, her heart steadying despite the chaos around her. Her life, until now, had been a careful balance of secrecy and survival. She had walked the streets as a shadow, invisible, small, and powerless in the eyes of those who wanted to destroy her. But her identity, the real truth of who she was a power they had never anticipated. A phone vibrated quietly in her pocket. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling not from fear but from anticipation. A single message: "They've found you. Act now." She allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. The men, still searching, whispered to one another, frustration creeping into their voices. One muttered, "Where is she? She's just a woman. We can handle her." Little did they know, the woman in front of them was far more than she appeared. She was connected to someone whose influence spanned across the city, someone who could dismantle their carefully built world with a single move. And in that moment, the tide began to shift. She moved quietly, blending into the shadows, each step deliberate, calculated. The men followed her instinctively, unaware that with every step they took, they were walking further into the trap they had unknowingly helped set. They thought they were predators, but they were the prey. A sudden sound, a single click, echoed from the street behind them. The men froze, panic flashing in their eyes. Security cameras, a fleet of waiting vehicles, and messages already being sent to powerful allies. The full weight of her network was closing in. The realization hit them too late. Their attack, their plan, their arrogance, all had been directed at the wrong person. The woman they underestimated, the mother they thought would break under pressure, was the very force capable of destroying them. Her calmness now contrasted sharply with their rising terror. She did not raise a weapon. She did not shout. She simply stood, holding her child, and let the truth of her existence speak louder than any threat. Never underestimate the strength hidden within those who fight to protect what they love most. The night was no longer hers alone. Somewhere beyond the shadows, the world had begun to shift. The men who had stalked her, relentless and fearless just hours before, now moved with caution, their arrogance replaced by a creeping, unmistakable fear. Evidence, carefully gathered and strategically revealed, was beginning to surface. Files, messages, recordings, each one a thread unraveling the elaborate web the villains had woven. And as the first notifications reached authorities, the hunters realized that the walls around them were closing in. Could it be that the tables have finally turned? The mother thought, her heart steady even as adrenaline pulsed through her veins. The men darted through dimly lit streets, whispers of panic spilling from their lips. "It's happening, they know everything," one shouted, his voice shaking for the first time. Their carefully orchestrated plan, built on secrecy and power, was collapsing like a house of cards in a storm. Sirens echoed in the distance, faint at first, then growing louder, sharper, closer. Police vehicles cut through the night, their lights painting red and blue streaks against walls and pavements. Every exit the men had once relied upon was now monitored, every safe corner now dangerous. Inside their headquarters, chaos erupted. Phones rang endlessly, messages flashed with evidence of their crimes, and every trusted ally suddenly seemed unreliable. The realization of accountability, of consequences long ignored, settled like a stone in their stomachs. They underestimated her, and now they are paying the price, the mother reflected silently, her hands tightening around her baby's soft blanket. The men who had once forced fear into her, who had dared to believe that a woman alone could be crushed without consequence, now felt the fear they had imposed on others. Their own shadows became hunters, creeping in the form of authority, justice, and exposure. Every step they took was watched, every move anticipated. There was no escape this time. The same streets they had used to corner her now funneled them into traps, their own city transforming into a labyrinth of accountability. And through it all, the mother moved unseen, her child safe in her arms, her mind clear. She watched the storm she had survived turn on those who had created it, and a quiet sense of relief settled over her. Not triumph born of revenge, but of justice finally catching up. She allowed herself a breath, soft and steady, as the chaos of the villains unraveling echoed in the distance. Their panic was proof that courage, patience, and love had the power to outmatch even the most ruthless of enemies. Those who spread fear often forget that truth and justice always have a way of finding them. The room was silent, heavy with tension. The air itself seemed to hold its breath as she stepped forward, her baby cradled safely in her arms. The powerful figures who had once orchestrated her suffering sat before her, faces pale, eyes wide, their confidence shattered. They had underestimated her. They had thought fear could control her. But now they realized the truth. The woman they had tried to destroy was unstoppable. How could they not see it coming? She thought, her gaze steady, unwavering, her voice calm but carrying the weight of everything they had done. One by one, they began to plead. "Please, we didn't know," one man stammered, his hands raised in desperation. Another fell to his knees, begging for mercy, eyes filled with the kind of fear they had once forced upon her. But she did not falter. She did not speak of vengeance or hate. Her only concern was her child, her only goal to ensure that no harm would ever come to the little life in her arms. "I will protect you no matter the cost," she whispered inwardly, feeling a surge of calm determination that silenced all lingering fear. She walked slowly around the room, her presence commanding without arrogance. Every whispered apology, every desperate plea, fell flat against the quiet power she radiated. The room, once a place where she had felt powerless, now belonged to her entirely. "You thought you could destroy me," she said, her voice soft but cutting, "and you thought you could take my child. But all of that is over." The people who had tormented her could only stare, realizing that their influence and wealth meant nothing against the resolve of a mother. Their schemes, their secrets, their lies, all of it crumbled in the face of her courage. She placed a hand gently on her baby's head, a protective gesture that spoke louder than words ever could. "No one will ever hurt you again," she vowed, letting the weight of her promise settle into the room. The villains shrank under her calm strength, understanding at last that the woman they had underestimated was the very force capable of dismantling their lives. They had begged for mercy, but she offered only a choice: leave and never return. Justice had found its own voice, and it needed no more than her resolve to speak it clearly. And as she turned to leave, the baby safe in her arms, she knew that this confrontation was more than an ending, it was a beginning. A beginning where fear no longer dictated their lives, where love and protection guided every step she would take. True strength is measured not by power over others, but by the courage to protect what matters most. The morning sun broke gently over the city, spilling soft golden light through the curtains of a small, secure apartment. The chaos of the night before felt distant now, like a storm that had passed, leaving behind only the calm and quiet of survival. The young mother sat on the edge of the bed, her baby nestled in her arms, soft breathing steady, the weight of innocence in her lap. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax, if only slightly. The world outside had been dangerous, relentless, and unforgiving, but here in this small haven she could finally breathe. "We're safe for now," she thought, brushing a gentle hand over the baby's head, feeling the softness of hair and warmth of skin. A small smile formed, tired but genuine, as she whispered, "No one will ever hurt you again, my love." The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Her eyes traced the room, imagining a life of peace, of normal days, of laughter that wasn't laced with fear. She felt the weight of all she had endured, the betrayals, the pursuit, the fear, and yet, she also felt the strength she had gained. She had survived, protected, and triumphed, even when the odds seemed impossible. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the secret battles that had raged just a night before. She rocked the baby gently, humming a soft lullaby she had once sung in the shadows of hidden streets, and a sense of calm washed over her. Finally, she thought, life could be ordinary again. But then, a letter slipped under the door caught her attention. She picked it up carefully, examining the elegant handwriting. It wasn't a threat, it couldn't be, but the words inside were enough to make her heart skip a beat. The baby had a future that no one had anticipated. A legacy, a secret waiting to unfold, something far greater than anyone in the past had realized. Her protective instinct surged anew, not because of danger, but because of the promise of something extraordinary that would require vigilance, wisdom, and love. Could it be possible that our story isn't finished? She wondered, eyes wide with awe and a touch of apprehension. The letter hinted at opportunities, responsibilities, and challenges that would shape her child's life in ways even she could not yet comprehend. It was a revelation that brought both hope and caution. Though the immediate danger had passed, the threads of destiny were already weaving a new chapter, one that promised growth, resilience, and perhaps trials she would face alongside her child. She held the baby closer, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her own, and whispered softly, "No matter what comes next, we will face it together." The warmth of that moment, the quiet victory, and the unspoken promise of the future filled her with both relief and resolve. Though the night of fear was over, the journey of life and destiny had only just begun. Even when peace is found, life may hold secrets that challenge us to rise stronger than ever.